Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank all of the witnesses for being here. Thank you and your family for serving. But I must tell you, I still believe that the American people are tired and sick of war and violence. Peace is not the absence of tension and conflict. Peace is the presence of justice. Mr. Walsh, Dr. Walsh, thank you for being here. You're a native of Atlanta, and I want to welcome you for being here. Is there anything that you would like to add to your testimony or clarify the record for the clarification of what you said, wanted to say?
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, and thank you for calling attention to my Georgia roots. I would like to extend my remarks because I argued that this is the most robust and intrusive nonproliferation agreement in the 70 years of the nuclear age, and I included in that a comparison to the Libya agreement. I'd like to spend a moment talking about Libya, if I may. The Iran agreement is clearly more robust than the Libyan agreement, and I supported the Libyan agreement, by the way. The Libyan agreement had no snapback sanctions. It had no dedicated procurement channel. It had no IAEA access beyond the additional protocol, all of which are features of the Iranian agreement. Now, it's been said that Libya dismantled what it had while Iran gets to keep some of its enrichment capability. And while I think that's technically true, it simply reflects the huge differences in the two circumstances. The Iran agreement came and was negotiated after Iran built 19,000 centrifuges, almost half of which were built under the Bush administration. Libya's nuclear efforts consisted largely of boxes of centrifuge parts, not an industrial-scale centrifuge program. Obviously, it's easier for a country to give up what it wants rather than what it already possesses. The administration took Gaddafi's word that it would not reconstitute the program, start an undeclared program. The Iran agreement is not based on trust. It is based on verification. As we talk about human rights and terrorism and other concerns, it seems odd to me to point to the Libya agreement. It was just a few years after the Libya nuclear agreement that the U.S. and its European allies were bombing the supposedly trustworthy and reformed Gaddafi because of allegations he was massacring his own people. Now, as it stands, I still think it was a good agreement because it was better, as with Iran, to have a bad actor that's doing bad things but doesn't have nuclear weapons. If we were going after Gaddafi, as we did with our European allies, and he had nuclear weapons, that would have been worse. But I don't know that I would cite the colonel as a particularly good figure in support of trust rather than verification. Now, I know you're getting wildly different assessments of the agreement and predictions about what will happen in the future. And as a policymaker, I'm sure that's hard to evaluate. Obviously, you should look at the evidence. You should look at the history. Are there internal contradictions in the arguments we're making to you? Do we really get the history right? But I would say, in addition to that, one way to judge who to believe and what to believe going in the future is to look at the track record of the prognosticators, of us here. In the past, have we been accurate in our predictions of what would happen? Take, for example, predictions around the Joint Plan of Action, the interim nuclear agreement that preceded the JCPOA. Now, we have had people, critics and some on this panel, who said arriving at the interim agreement would lead to the collapse of sanctions, that the sky was going to fall, that all these terrible things were going to happen, and none of it did. Those predictions were wrong. In fact, many of the fiercest critics of the interim agreement found themselves 2 years later arguing it should be extended rather than having an alternative comprehensive agreement. So, again, it's fair to look at the evidence, it's fair to look at the logic, and it's fair to look at the track record of whether people have been right or wrong in the past about their predictions. So let me pause there in case you have additional questions.
Dr. Walsh, going forward, if Iran cheats or violates the terms of the agreement, can the United States and allies reimpose sanctions?
Absolutely. I don't think people really appreciate the miracle of the snapback sanctions. At any point, any member of the P5+1 or P5 on the Security Council, for any reason, Doesn't have to wait for IAEA, doesn't have to wait for anyone else. If the United States thinks that Iran is a material breach of the agreement, it goes to the Security Council, it says, Iran is cheating, and at that moment, bang, the clock starts. A 30-day clock starts ticking. And those sanctions snap back in 30 days unless the Security Council passes a resolution to extend them. So you might say, well, maybe the Europeans, the Russians, will try to extend that and prevent the snapback. And yet, the U.S. has a veto power. That's the beauty of the new snapback sanctions. If Russia tries to block, the Chinese try to block, the Europeans try to block our ability to reimpose sanctions, we veto it, and those sanctions take effect.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh. You're back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Meehan.
Thank you.